Okay, so today we are doing the part 2 of the model. So in the 7 gates, I split it up into 7 steps. The first 3 we talked about were TED. The last 4 are all in relationship to values, where we establish our rule book. And this is where we begin to integrate what we recognized in ourselves, rather than isolating those aspects of self. Now we're aware of them. We begin to integrate, which then leads to the spiritual adulting process, which I know you've read the book. That means that we're whole and balanced with all of the aspects, the archetypes, etc., and the psyche. So I'm going to take you back to the image that we talked about with the TED, and I added some stuff to it. So last time we spoke clearly about that we all come from desire. Good morning. That we all come from desire, that all things are found in that universal consciousness. And it's that duality that creates the problem. The feeling that we are separate from something, the feeling that we're isolated. We'll talk a little bit about shame, where shame originates from. This idea of isolation and separation leads us to kind of not really know what we're doing here in the world. And that question of what am I doing here? What's my purpose? And we'll talk about some of that today. So the second part of the model is all about integration that then leads to wholeness and balance. The process of being dual and becoming unified is the process of individuation. That's the entirety of the spiritual journey. So that's the inner process that's happening, that we keep going back. I've said before, people will say, oh, but I already worked on that. I'm like, no. We keep going back to the same thing over and over and over, and it refines. And I call it turning of the triangles. So we integrate. And finally, all of these archetypes are within us, and they're not creating separation or isolation. Then that individuation process happens internally. That's not the end of the journey. That's just the end, if that's even a possibility, of the introspection. Because then we have to come out into the world, which is the values, and live that. Okay, so you guys have heard me say before, head, heart, heels. So the individuation process, once we identify the duality, and we'll talk about the trickster today, where that, although we talked about last time where that happens, the values begin to give us some form, a container of how to be individuated, of how to be whole, of how to be integrated, true to ourselves. That's the heart piece. Then there's the walking the walk, the heels. That is the essence of becoming, of being. So this is just part of the way home. Okay, so it's not the entirety, but all of that part comes under here. So we're really talking about the individuation process, taking all of those said fragments, deadly sins, archetypes, desires, whatever word you like, putting yourself back together, individuated with that. You sit well with judgments, you sit well with your desires, then using the value system to eventually walk your walk. So we'll cover those things today. So we're here. We're in awareness, right? We're aware that we're dual. We're aware that we have a mind, a body, a spirit, a bunch of eyes. We're aware that judgments are confessions and they're great, that our emotions are manipulative, all the jargon. But what do we do with it? If we don't put ourselves back together, then we just stay there. And so hence the book is the 7 steps beyond self-awareness. So awareness is just part of the piece. And this is a very tricky, and I use that word intentionally, part of the journey, because this is exactly where the trickster lives. And on a slide that I talk about the trickster is synonymous with duality. The trickster is synonymous, for those of us on a spiritual journey, with the cult leader or that teacher that's selling you a bag of goods and not a walking their walk and applying it. Okay, and we all have the potential. We all do that. We're all tricksters. It's where lying, betraying, all of it comes to play. So the invitation is, once we've done TED or continue to do TED and realize we're the creator of all of it, that everything is mental, there is no other, it's all projection. Where, you know, the ones that are struggling, what do we do with that? Right? We don't just stay there. That's just awareness. And so a lot of people stay there, but the invitation really is to go into teenager and then eventually into spiritual adulting. So we're here and we need to identify a value system, and we choose the purpose of the value system. And there's not a wrong or right answer. It really is to choose, are you going to continue to be incongruent, or are you going to choose to integrate? And each situation with your value system will present the opportunity to pick. That then has a consequence, which we'll talk about, which are the sacrifices and the offerings. So this is the part of the journey that we are. So we're here and we want to get here. And the key piece to sort of put them together is the value system. Once we are identified with a value system, we have the 5 pillars, which we'll talk about. We have describable, measurable values, rules in our rule book, and we are walking that walk. Then maybe we can say that we are living our value system and that we are in unified consciousness. That is the rest of our life. So this idea of a spiritual journey or the individuation, or going into the underworld or shadow work, is an invitation to feel a little bit almost isolated, or going into the cave. You know, if you think of the spiritual text, right? People went to monasteries, ashrams, things like that. So in our modern day, it might be in your house, or you take a respite from work, or you decide to be single, right? Whatever your version of that is. And you do this. That isn't the end of it. That is getting to this point that I have desires, they're destructive, I haven't been honest, I have veils, I'm going to remove them, and now I'm going to have a value system. Then the real work of unified consciousness, because unified consciousness is only truth 9 out of 12, is then walking the walk day in and day out, day in and day out, day in, day out, so that what you say you will be is actually what you will become. So we are in this process of becoming, and none of us are anywhere near it. But this is the closest we get to that becoming. Without this step, there's no becoming. You're just at that awareness that, okay, I created everything. Okay, that conflict or my desires are destroying me and whatnot. So if you've read any of my stuff, I talk about the suspension bridge metaphor. And this suspension bridge metaphor actually started when my children were entering middle school. I was terrified of middle school. And I was like, I'm going to lose my kids in middle school. And then I realized that developmentally in the spiritual path, we have that same teenage or adolescence, and this is where we are. So the invitation of having a value system, even writing one down, forget implementing it, is you're leaving the safety, security of land. You're entering a liminal space. You have no clue, just like in adolescence. Maybe you hung out with the wrong people. Maybe you got into drugs and alcohol. Maybe you were promiscuous. Whatever your thing was, on the spiritual journey, we have the exact same thing again. A lot of time people end up in analysis at this point, where they realize that the safety and the security that they either perceived they had in a marriage that blew up, a parent passing, they were shown some light about some truth in childhood that was a kept secret, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, what has my life been? A whole lie. This tends to be a place where people enter analysis. And so we're off of this sort of safe, solid ground, because some level of snow globe shattering has happened, and we may not want to walk the walk. We may not want to be in the liminal space, but we realize that we have to. You can go as far into the suspension bridge as you want and get to the other side. That's the hope. Or you can see a little bit, remove a veil or two, and then go right back. A lot of people do that. And that's just the way it is. That's a personal choice. So a values-led life is scary. Let's not pretend that it is anything that we want. We don't. We like to be in the subconscious. We like to be children. We like our life to just kind of lead us and not have to worry about these things. So usually when we get to this point, it's not because we want to, it's because we have to. Something blew up. Some level of delusion and illusion was sort of opened up and the veil removed that we got here. Okay. Some people choose to not walk on the liminal space and repackage their delusion and do it all over again and stay in that. And that's okay. But that's not us, right? We're here to learn to keep going. What's so scary about this liminal space? You meet teachers that may not be good teachers. That's written in the scriptures that is part of this path. You might substitute one addiction for another addiction, another delusion. You may go halfway and stay there, right? You stay in the monastery, you stay in that depression, you stay in that crisis because you have no clue how to get out. I mean, these are real things that occur. And so why the hell would we want to go into this space? There's no certainty. There's no right answers. There's no permission, and there's no saviors. That's what I call my oh crap syndrome. Certainty, right answers, permission, and saviors. That's scary. It's on you. You are on that bridge alone and ain't nobody saving you. You go back or you go forward or you stay. Those are your three options, you know? And so values give us that. So I use this imagery because I'm going to give you a 2-quote sort of practice that if you're just starting out, it's a good shortcut until you really define your value systems and all your pillars and such. But there's boundaries on either side. And ultimately, that's what values are. Values become boundaries so that we hit upon and we know. I was out to dinner last night and one of the girls had lost 100 pounds. And she was talking about her food rules, right? Food rules are an obvious boundary for people that struggle with weight. So that keeps you kind of safe on your bridge. But now we're talking about our soul, not only our earthly life, money, food, diet, things like that. We're talking about the boundaries of our soul. That's very scary because this isn't something tangible. This isn't something palpable. It is, but it's not. It's a liminal space. So we're going to talk about the interplay of earth and spirit. Again, awareness is not enough here. Awareness keeps you on the safety of your delusion of your land. It does not invite you into the space to really, really discover who you are. If you get to the other side, and you will go off and on and off and on, this is not a one and done. Okay, that's where a lot of people think, oh, I've already done this before. You will get on and off and through and over and back and forth and under and over and all of that. But as we do this, then once we get on the other side and we have a very clear value system, then we're on our way to spiritual adulting, because now as situations are presented in our life, in our world, in our environment, in our family, we know what we expect of ourselves. That does not guarantee we do it, though. And that is very important to understand. When we leave the crisis, when we leave the liminal space of the journey of the underworld of the shadow, and we have to reemerge in society, and why a lot of people choose to stay checked out and go into the monastery and the ashram. And I'm using those terms because that's what's used spiritually. In this day and age, it's retreat hopping, right? I mean, there's a version of all of that. If we decide to stay in that world, we're never in the world to apply if we're going to live our value system. So again, we haven't come back and reemerged as the trickster. So the trickster is a tricky guy. It's a tricky archetype, but as there's a title of a book that says that a version of the trickster runs the world. So once you get your value system on that bridge, in that liminal space, once you figured out the ins, the outs, the right, the wrong, the left, the right, tweaking this and this and that, then you get on the other side of the bridge, and now you walk your walk or you don't. You remain incongruent, you live with integrity. Those are your options. And that is a day in and day out discovery. Nobody can tell you that. That is personal and internal. Okay. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So how do we get from duality? Let me just bring you here. Remember, the moment we're conceived, in the moment of space and time, the duality exists. That is the trickster. If nothing else, understand that duality equals the trickster archetype. And my telling you that when you get to the other side of the bridge, I am telling you, you must become the trickster again. That seems like what? That is very tricky for people to understand on a spiritual path. When you get out of this experience, you have to repackage yourself, wear a veil, and sell the world your brand. That's a trickster. There you're unified because you understand how to utilize the trickster when you need to live in the world within your value system. That's a tricky part. But the first thing is, once we leave the universal consciousness, the trickster occurs. The trickster is immediately created at the moment of conception. Josh, did you have a question? You're on mute.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to forget, so I wanted to ask real quick. Sure. So when you become the trickster again, would that be the same as the label of shapeshifter or reapplying the mask? Yes. When we, like when I go to AA or be around certain people, I don't talk what we talk about. So I kind of repackage it.
Perfect and example. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So if I'm out with friends, I'm Frances, the human being, out with a bunch of girlfriends, and that's the identity, right? I'm just a human being with girls. I'm a single woman trying to meet a boy. That's it. This knowledge is with me. The conversation when I speak, and this happened last night, that's why I'm saying this, it was 4 single women. And when ex-boyfriends come up, my language of me and my responsibility is part of it, right? Like when you go to AA, you're understanding that you're the one who has to not drink, right? There isn't a magic savior. There isn't, your higher power is a part of you, right? So the verbiage and the teachings and the wisdom gained stays with you. That doesn't change. That's the congruity. But the environment, you just suit it to the environment. That's exactly right. So you shapeshift, you're the trickster, because what the situation calls for. My essence, my Frances essence, is not to go out on a Friday night on St. Patrick's Day, not in hell. But my earthly human single woman has a desire to meet somebody, went out on a Friday night at St. Patrick's Day. But I took all my wisdom with her. And that's the congruence of I'm always there as the soul, but in the form of the ego, the trickster. I got to play the part. I got to play the game. You have to. On my board, I have be in on the con. That's how I say it. Be in on the con. To meet a guy, you got to go out. Ain't raining men coming, you know, my roof isn't caving in and some guy showing up in my bed. That's the reality. So get in on the con. And when you go to AA, that part of you. But Josh and his wisdom doesn't separate. There's no duality. That's you bringing in the integral, sort of integrated being. Yes, so that's on point. Was that clear, Suzanne? Any questions about that? Because that's important.
Yeah.
People really struggle with that.
Yeah, I get all that. I understand what you guys are saying, but I guess I don't understand why that's a con. That's, you know, I guess I don't understand the language.
That's a great question. It's a con because it's a veil, right? You have to play the role, right? And so if you're with women that want to bash men, you kind of chuckle and go, yeah, I've had my share of dudes, but I know that I am the responsible. I created those breakups, right? So I'm in on the con that girls bash men when they're out drinking, right? I don't drink. I hold a glass of wine. I don't drink, a sip here, there, I'm in on it. I'm in on what the environment, what the social norm requires. But I am Frances to my core, and that still comes out. It's not that I go away. That's identity. That's true soul-driven identity. Whereas the majority of people are morphing into whatever the situation calls because they don't have a clear value system and a clear identity. It may look the same, but it's very different. Remember, this is an internal process. That bridge is internal. And the best way, me as a reader, when people come to me, that I can tell is archetypal by the word choice. That's the clincher. That's really, really, really gonna be the determinant from someone who's listening, if they're self as a soul-driven life or ego-driven life. It really is going to be word choice. Our thoughts, these archetypes, become what we say, like the logos, the mind of God, and then becomes the behaviors. But that's why it's a con, because you have to play the role. And this is difficult for people. So when we're selling, when it's false, this authentic life, oh, well, I don't have to be in that job and I'm not going to stay in that relationship. That's not authentic. Authentic isn't say whatever the hell you want, when you want, drop bombs because you're a truth teller. That's another veil. It's a whole other layer of a veil. And so this is the sticky note spirituality that you see that isn't accurate. You have committed in a relationship, unless you have to have boundaries, right? In my value system, in my relationship bucket, if there's abuse, that's a non-negotiable. Other than that, you stay and you commit to what you committed to with your children, with your job. But this doesn't mean that you can't change your environment and circumstances, but you're very clear that you are choosing to break a bond, to be a trickster. It's not on the other person or the job or the situation. That's why it's a con. Okay. So we start off with duality, moment of conception. Duality is separation. It's a feeling of separation. It's an illusion of being separate. That's why we go into victimhood. He said, she said, they did, that happened, my story. That's why the story harms us. The unity is the goal. And then we repackage some dual and play the role. It's opposite in a way. So now you've TED talked. Now you've realized that you're prideful, that you're envious, that you're gluttony. Now what, right? So you continue doing the TED Talks. The TED Talk is a reminder that you are human, the reminder that your sinful, desirous nature does not go away. Usually at this point, once we've reached that aha of the principle of mentalism, I've created it all. I am the common denominator in these relationships, in these stories, in these jobs, in this life of mine. The conflicts tend to be lesser grade. So if you've done my conflict worksheet and I say conflict sentence in one sentence, scale of 1 to 10, you start getting 2s and 3s. Because now the fire, the desire, the fire, the creative force of what you're here to do isn't tied up in conflict and fear. But we keep doing TED Talks. I TED Talk regularly and I'm like, oh, there's my pride. Oh, there's my pride. Oh, there's my pride. So that doesn't change. The suspension bridge is I'm on a secure land. Oh, there's my pride. Yep, got that. Got it from my buckets, got it from my past life. That's my Hydra head. But despite having pride, I am now going to move into the world with no certainty, but have values and move forward. So the TED Talks are staples in our psyche to continue a reminder that we have to meet our own needs, that that all conflict is created by us so that we can make a change because it's rooted in desire, and that really there is no separation. We are choosing to be separate and feel divided because of our own victimhood. That's the constant recurring of the psychological orgasm. So once you take ownership of that constant psychological orgasm, you meet your needs, you get out of victimhood, now the soul can emerge as the leader of the life. The ego does not go away. That is the trickster. That is the duality. That's the con. The ego does not go away. You have to play the game. You have to play the game. And so now the soul is driving life and the ego takes a back road. That's a very big flip. Now you're living in unified consciousness. Your soul identity, what you are here to do and become, rules the show, and the ego follows, right? And you're going to see, I'm going to explain more of this in a minute. So this, you need both, leads you to unified consciousness. Yes.
So when we talk about that psychological orgasm, is there multiple, like there's multiple veils, or is that psychological orgasm kind of that immortal Hydra head?
The psychological orgasm
Does that make sense?
on different veils, absolutely. But you are going to have one core thing. And I've shared mine before, right? My pride would lead me to hopelessness. That was my thing. So when I was in hopelessness, I was trying to hide really that I was just such a prideful person. It is indeed your immortal Hydra head. Your main sin, that one that recurs at the root. You could be working on lust, right? You're dating and you're meeting people and you're working on lust and you're working through your sex and your shame and all of that. Great. But that's not the one. If you really go to the core, the one that is pretty standard, in my case, it's pride. That's that one immortal Hydra head. But we have all of them. Most people never get past their first, because that's where their job ends, their work ends. Oh, I'm prideful. I work the pride, and that's it. Life kind of pushes you through the gates. The myth of Inanna, which is what the 7 gates is based on, you see that repeated. You see that in the Song of Salome, the Dance of Salome, and the 7 veils. You see that repeated, the 7 primary planets in astrology. You see this idea of the 7 over and over, that we have to walk through them, but we don't always choose to. And this is part of the premise that if you're comfortable, if the pain isn't enough, you're probably going to just stay where you are. And that's okay. That's, each person is an individual and gets to decide that. But this level of crisis, of existential crisis, because it is an existential crisis, where each veil is like removed. And that's why you tend to go into a depression or an ashram or a monastery, because you need to do this thing alone. You're so raw, tends to just expose all of your Hydra heads. But if you could get to at least your main one with the psychological orgasm and have an understanding that you're the creator of all of it, that you're the one who feels separate, that you're the one projecting, that is huge growth. I mean, that would maybe even change the mental health crisis in this country. So not every person is going to be invited or invite themselves, I should say, rather, to remove every single veil and Hydra head, right? I mean, your life will dictate and how much pain and your specific journey. I can only speak about my own and what the texts say, that this is the process. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So in John 3:30, John the Baptist talks about Jesus and says, he must increase, but I must decrease. What he's referring to is your soul increasing and your ego decreasing, the trickster, where you now begin to live a soul-focused, a soul-centered life with the ego following. It does not say eliminate. Nowhere does this say eliminate, okay? Decrease. That's it. Decrease. Hierarchy, and I'm going to talk about hierarchy. Where the soul is the larger guiding light, the self with a capital S, or the self with a lowercase s, if you like that terminology. Okay. So this is what we're aiming for. We are not aiming to eliminate desire. We are not aiming to eliminate a trickster. We are not aiming to eliminate veils. Temporarily, we must, so the light can flood in, show us everything, begin to live soul-centered, value-centered, making integrated whole choices, and then the ego follows as the decrease. So if Jesus is the God or the divine, the soul, the self with a capital S, then John the Baptist is a man, the human, the flesh, the desires, the S with the self with the lowercase s. Okay. And we will talk about hierarchy in a minute because that's important. I think a lot of people mess that up. So the trickster is the do as I say, not as I do. Awareness is not enough. It's a good place, but it's not enough. When you're really on that suspension bridge, when you're really living or beginning to live value-centered, soul-focused, a purposeful, divine-driven life, it's not about doing as I say and not as I do, but doing as I say and doing as I do, all of it. Okay, that's the function of a value system. It's to hold you accountable. You're very good at holding everybody else accountable. All of us are. You didn't do, and you said you were going to do, and you let me down, but no one goes me. All of us hold everybody else accountable. I'm on the watch. I am time conscious. But, oh, what about me, right? So
I never stop hearing that.
What?
I never stop hearing, I swear you're like in my brain, there is no other. I mean, it's like, it's kind of painful at times.
It's painful, but it's the antidote, if you will, right? Which leads us to the value system. We have to get to that point of shattering. That level of delusion we at least have to get to. Because if there's any victimhood, then we're in trickster, right? So again, this is not about eliminating the trickster. It's about understanding what the trickster provides to us. And that's part of the veils and the projection and the other in the story. So this came up last night because I am Francis, right? And I'm going to bring my Francisness no matter where I go, even if it's to a group of 4 single women, right? And this shows up. And we started talking about how what we judge in our partner is really about us. And even though it's not literal, sometimes it could be literal. So what's the biggie? The biggie is the betrayal, right? They lied, they cheated, right? That's the one that gets everybody's panties in a wad. And I'm like, who are you kidding? The biggest betrayer is you, right? So one of my minor assignments for clients is something you want to achieve. And I'll pick on this one client because I knew she wasn't going to follow her own advice, right? Or she wasn't going to follow through. And she has like an essential oils business and she wanted to put like 1 Instagram post a week. And very minor. And you're going to see these are very, very, very minor things that we first start off before we have a big value system and a house of values. And I think the other thing was that she wanted to do like 10 sit-ups, like 3 days a week, something like that. So inevitably, I knew she wasn't going to do that. And she knew. And the next session, she had not done these 2 seemingly minor things because we are the trickster. We are the problem. We want others to do and then when they follow through, they don't follow through, we're upset, but we don't have that level of accountability. So, and both of you and whoever's going to be watching this knows enough about my symbols, right? Triangles, squares, and circles, which those are the 3 shapes of everything. The square is accountability. The square is the value system. So the circle is what we come from, the wholeness. The triangle is the thought at conception that makes us feel separate. And the square is the life that we create. That's our value system. So it's circle, triangle, square. And then if you look down here, the logo is the squared circle, all 3 unified, mind, body, spirit. And that's what this represents, right? Here you have the circle of spirit and the cross of matter. This antenna is like the thought, right? So the trickster is so representative of what we put onto others, and they don't follow through. And if we really strip back maybe the literalness of it, we can realize that it's ourselves. We are not people of integrity. So the value system is not about what I am, it's what I want to become. And if you've had a value session with me, I ask, what are your top 2 values in the Campy family? And the first thing I say after you finally figure them out is, yeah, and you don't do that. You're not that. You want to be that, but you don't do that. And we have to really get clear that we are not living by our value system. Okay. And that's the invitation of this part of the journey, which is exciting. So we have to have a value system to live by, so that the dual nature, the ego and the spirit, the John the Baptist and the Jesus, the big self with a capital S and the little self with a lowercase self, can be unified. That's the function of this part of the journey. We decrease the ego. We do not eliminate it. That is not true. There are times in the journey where your ego dissolves enough for you to see the clarity of all of your desires and all of your Hydra heads, but you cannot live in that state. That is not sustainable. That is too painful. And if you do choose to do that with a severe depression or suicidal tendencies or escapism, it's a form of escapism. So the soul emerges as an invitation because we've pulled back enough ego that the soul emerges and says, oh, I'm going to lead the show here. Another thing about the journey, when you get to the other side of the suspension bridge, chop wood, get enlightened, chop wood. You're the same. You are the same. This is not like this thing that you're going to be flying in gold halos around you and the birds are going to be attracted to you. The nonsense of that. You are the exact same. You're chopping wood, whatever that means to you. I'm a teacher. I went right back to being a teacher, a loud, obnoxious cute. So that doesn't change. You might change your job. You might have changed your relationship. My hair fell out. It was curly. It grew back. But here I am, straight, stick straight hair, like I had when I was. Chop wood, get enlightened, chop wood. So this thing of the soul emerging, and all of a sudden we're like flying on thin air, and halos and birds are attracted to us. That's stuff of the movies. Okay, like the real soul emerged person knows that they have the same nonsense that they had when they were on the other side of the bridge. Okay, like let's get real about who we are, people. I mean, this is just the nonsense that is spewed out on the internet that I cannot handle. The difference is we now have a life of integrity. Right? If you know me, you tell me, oh, I just learned that yesterday. Oh, yeah, I'm so prideful. I don't know if I can get out of my own way. Like that is, I know this about myself. I don't delude myself in pretending that I know anything. That's integrity. All right, we'll browse together, we'll fly. So there's a lightness and an opportunity in that that's just so liberating. You're like, I don't freaking know. Let's make it up. And you're going to hear me say, make it up, because it's all made up. Okay. The other thing about the square that here is represented by the cross, anything in symbology that is a cross or a square is illusion. What that means is it dies. When you go back to wherever you believe you go back to, that the soul, the spirit goes, the body, the earth, the personality, the ego stays. It's dead. That is what is meant by the world of illusion. Okay, so we must live in the world of illusion as a trickster with veils while we're incarnated. But when you leave, wherever you believe you go, all of that stays. So when you recognize that you're in a world of illusion, you realize it's all made up. Josh, who is our crypto king over here, knows that money is all made up. You can't take it with you. So if you can't take it with you, make it up. Your house, your bank account number, your body size, it's all made up. That's one of the guidance one of the pieces of guidance. When you don't know your value, you make it up because it's all made up. Values is earth, values is the square, values is the cross of matter, and it's made up. So it doesn't matter if she wants to post one Instagram post or 1,000. She didn't keep her word. That's the key. There was no integrity to what you said you were going to do. That's the problem, not what you say you're going to do. Say you're going to have 3 raisins a day, have 3 raisins a day. That is unified consciousness. That's how simple this part is, and we make it so complicated with our story and the illusion and the nonsense. Okay? So it's a life of integrity and keeping a word to yourself. It's your own internal rule book. Now, at this stage, when truly we're on the other side of the suspension bridge, when you're truly living a soul-centered life, there is a vibrational shift, right? It's transmutation. In the native tradition, they call it hemblakya, like a vision from God that you get on your vision quest. And if you live that vision, that vibration, people sense it, right? You've seen people with grace, and you're like, I want that. You know it. You know it. It's like, I want their grace. It's palpable, right? They just vibrate at something that, that's what I'm talking about. I'm joking about the halos and the flying and the birds being attracted to you, but that's how it's presented in spirituality and movies and stuff, because they have to show you that there's something almost godlike about the person, that they vibrated something that, like, oh my God, they must know something. And I want that. And that's what you're seeking in a teacher. So one of the key teachings in this part of the path, if you're going to cross over that threshold and onto that bridge, you need a mentor. You need a teacher. You need someone from the guidelines that says, no, move to the right, move to the left. Someone who's going to nudge you. And there's 2 types, the Busirises and the Nereises. The Busirises are the trickster. In the Garden of Hesperides myth with Hercules, and you both have taken the shaman class, that's the 3rd class. That's the low-level consciousness. You're going to meet a teacher who is going to promise you ease and gold and all these things, and what they give you is shackles. And that is part of the path. We all have one. I've had 3. It's part of it. Because if you know that, then you know the truth. You know the grace. You know the vibration of what is not that. And that's hopefully what you want to become. So this is a very tricky part of the path. And that's why it's not easy. Awareness is not enough. And that's usually when most therapists or books or teachings take you, because now you're jumping and you don't know if there's a bridge. You don't know if there's hold on that bridge that you're going to fall through, right? It's scary. It's an invitation, but most people don't heed the call, as Campbell says. So here we stop the betrayal. This is an important concept. I'm not going to talk about it too much today, but I want you to know that shame is what creates your trickster. Shame is you in your most powerful. And if you go back in the psychological x-ray, the 4th question is, what is your first moment of shame from 0 to 7? Your first moment of shame is what creates your trickster, because you were like, put that away. For me, I gave a reading when I was 3 years old. I didn't even know what the hell I was doing. And I told some lady at the cult, and I was beat. So I obviously put this part of me away until I was 40. If it's your sexuality, someone walked in on you masturbating, put that away. Whatever that moment of shame, and it's not always so easily palpable the first time. As you unveil and unmask, mine wasn't, that was not clear. I thought it was this pool incident that happened when I was 7 or 8. Then I started going back when the veil started removing, and I was like, there it is. So that moment of shame creates the trickster, because some adult usually says, put that away. We don't do that here. And that's your gold. That's what you hopefully find on the other side. That is exactly what you need, exactly who you are, exactly the soul-driven life that you're going to create. However, with values, because that without values will destroy you. Suzanne loves Lilith. That's your Lilith. So the Lilith and the Gemini, the Mercury in your chart are very related, because shame, Lilith, creates the trickster. So that teaching is very palpable, but we'll leave that at there. The soul doesn't care about earthly things. So why would the soul care about values? If values are earthly, they represent the square and the cross. Because it has to work with the ego. Remember, duality is becoming unity. You cannot ignore the ego. When you don't TED Talk and you stop at the side of the road because some guy's broken down and you give him $50, that's your ego trying to hide that you want someone to help you, that you're greedy, that you feel bad for them, blah, blah, blah. So that is not unity. That's duality, just the 0 to 100, the selfless nonsense. It doesn't exist. Real unity, I recognize my ego and it supports my soul's work. So the soul doesn't care about the earthly ego. The soul doesn't care about the earthly hierarchy. The soul doesn't care about how much money you have in your damn bank account. But the ego does, and they must work together. You increase and decrease, but they're still there. That's why in the trickster, the circle of spirit is above the cross of matter. Nowhere is the cross of matter not existent. And that is a big problem that people misunderstand in spirituality. So the question is not, who am I? It's, who do I want to be? Who am I is the soul. Your soul knows. My soul knew when I was 3 years old, giving that girl a reading, who the hell I was. I didn't know. Well, my soul knew exactly what I came to do here. Who do I want to be is an ego question. What do I want that soul, Helios, that must be born from us to look like? And that is a personal choice. There is no right or wrong. You want 10 zeros in your bank account, millions and millions and millions, so be it. You want to be 120 pounds, so be it. The earthly doesn't matter, but it must support the soul so that it can be unified. So your question to answer, your who am I, is already there. At the moment of conception, God asked the question and you are the answer to it. It is gonna come out. Do not worry about that. It's how you want it to look like. Who do you want to be as you are living out that soul? The packaging, the veil, the trickster. Clear? So how do we increase him and decrease me? How do I increase soul and decrease ego, yet work together? The purpose of life is to learn how to die. What we are dying to is decreasing, not dying full of the ego, dying to the Hydra head, right? So I'm very prideful. I have never minced words around that. But by living my value system, the 2 quotes exercise I'll give you, knowing how I want to show up in the world, the soul leads and the ego follows. Does my ego do stuff that I'm like, oh, damn, you did that shit again, girlfriend? Yeah, every damn day. This isn't perfection. It's integration. So the purpose of life is learning how to die. Every time you try to go on that suspension bridge, go back, go forward, go on, go off, all of that nonsense, which is the biggest part of the journey, the repeat, what I call shifting the triangle again and again and again, you're dying to something. Usually it's an archetype or a veil or a delusion or a snow globe, right? With astrology, we oftentimes call it a transit. Oh, Saturn, now I have Saturn. So I'm dying to my Saturn, wherever I have that, to that aspect of me, or Neptune or Pluto. So there's multiple ways of saying this. But if you don't learn to die, and you start off the journey and you end the journey the exact same way, that's scary. I find that to be the scariest thing. To think that I spent however many years I'm going to be on this earth, and that I started and ended the exact same way for fear of wanting to die. By virtue of life, you learn things, right? Things just kind of happen to you. But to actively participate in your dying, it's a pretty special process to have that level of integration. So you learn to die to what you are not, your TED, right? I'm not hopeless at all. I was a manipulated person who was hopeless. So that had to shrink, right? The pride has to shrink. Again, it's about shrinking it. It is not about eliminating it, transmuting it. And then letting what you really are emerge, that moment of shame, that thing that you were said, put that away. We don't do that in this family. Allowing that in a healthy way. Healthy is the balanced, healthy word there. The self needs direction. So yes, I knew at 3-4 years old that I was meant to do this work. My soul knew. But if without a container, without values around it, you will either not do it and it'll be done very much like a match that is put out. That could have been the last time I ever gave some guidance, or it could destroy the world. Those are your two options without values. You're going to put out your light, or it is going to be a forest fire and you are going to burn. And we are afraid of that. That is why values is a square, is the earth element, is the cross of matter, which is the same as the square in earth. And it is a container, a bonfire. Without that, your fire will poof or just destroy. Each moment you're invited to remember the falsehood. That's the point of the TED, but that's it. Then you walk on your bridge and you go and you live your values. And you're at your TED and you go, oh, there's my pride again. And now I'm going to walk on the bridge and get to the other side and walk my values. So nobody is killing an ego. Nobody is killing their pride. Nobody is going to be selfless. Nonsense. It's owning it. There it is. But I have this set of rules that dictates how my soul's journey is going to go. And I'm going to have this a beautiful bonfire, this grace. And I'm going to walk into the world with that. Head, heart, heels. So values are a to-be list that supports your to-do list. Your to-do list is, I have to go to the gym because my body. I have to eat this because of my body. I have to work so I can have money in my bank account. I have to this for this. That's your ego-driven list. I call that the outcomes, right? Your outcome wins, and they're necessary. That's the nonsense of, oh, the universe will provide. Nonsense. You have to pay your bills. You got to eat. You got to do your worldly, earthly thing. But the question is it supported by your to-be list, your process wins, your values? So who you are, your soul knows exactly who you are. It's already programmed from the moment of conception. God had a question. You are here to answer it, and you will answer it with no help. You don't need me. You don't need your parents. You don't need help. You are programmed to do that thing which your soul came to do. But you grew up in a family, in a gender, in a society, in a culture. You got bills to pay. You want to be hot. You want to look good. You want to have the nice car. Have it. But don't let it put out what your soul came to do. We want to support it. So this glyph is the glyph of Mars. Many would say that this is the glyph of the ego, and it is. And it's also the glyph of the soul. Because the circle of spirit is the circle of spirit, and it's not going anywhere. It is going to take you exactly where you need to go. But the arrow is your job. What does it look like? Is it going to be ego-driven, or is it going to be soul-driven? That's the question. You are responsible for what it looks like. That is your job. And if you like money and you want to work or invest and learn about crypto and all your money, then have it. That's why the nonsense of, oh, if I'm poor or if I'm humble, nonsense. Please. But because these are the demons, the greed and the envy and the gluttony, the teachings have to represent a rich ass Buddha leaving the rich ass town, the palace, and going to suffer and not eat the rice. And we have to be more discerning of these teachings because we have intellect and we have a modern culture. And logic and discernment is part of the spiritual path. They needed to show you that him not having any suffering versus him having suffering, and figuring out that him not eating was suffering, and that was selfless and harmful and not feeding his body and not having values. And we're missing something. Like if these things are spelled out for us and digested for us, and here we no, think. Okay. And so it's our job to think how it's going to look like for us, for our life. And nobody could tell you that. Nobody, no right answers and no saviors and no permission, none of that. This is on you. And if you like money, have at it. And if you want to be hot, have at it. And if you want a corner office, have at it. Whoever said these teachings are being really misrepresented? Now, get to a point where you realize that stuff isn't satisfactory. You're soul driven. And now you want to be what I call self at service. And now you want to serve, and maybe you build with that money an institution. Then you start to see the integrated spiritual adult. But you're not an egomaniac because you want a corner office, and you're not spiritual because you're poor and eating scraps. No. So, for example, how does your soul know? If your soul is here to take care of plants, that's your thing, right? You know you live for the plants. You can have one little plant in your backyard that you water and you prune and you take care of for 20, 30 years, and you take care of your plant. Your soul knows that you are here to take care of your plant. But your ego wants an arboretum. Your ego wants all of it. Give it to it. But it's unified. It's unified. You want one plant or you want a whole arboretum? You choose. Now, if the money of the arboretum and the attention you get in the arboretum and all of that desire leads the show, then you've lost it. But you're still going to be there with your little soul's journey of planting a plant. Let's not get confused here. Okay? They work together. You decide what you want it to look like in the earthly realm. Your values dictate that. The life you want and who you want to be must be defined in order to keep your soul and ego in check. This glyph, on track, soul focused, defined and measurable. So the soul's job in this example, plants, is aligned with the ego's job, the life you want, the bank account you want, the body you want, the health you want, the place you want to live that you want. So your environment, your earthly world, is supporting your soul's journey, and your soul is directing it, that all the ego stuff doesn't bother it. If you lose it, it's fine. If you have more of it, it's fine. It doesn't matter. That's very different than, oh, I'm going to be impoverished and now I'm humble. Nonsense. And that was the Buddha's teaching. He didn't want to eat the rice. And then he had the moment of, oh my God, if I don't feed this body, I'm going to die. Can't reach enlightenment without a body. So the nonsense. And so these teachings must almost like present an extreme, right? So that we understand austerity and we understand these concepts, but not because we're here to like not enjoy certain pleasures. That goes all the way back to last time of the desires. It's about finding the container to manage the desires so that they're not self-destroying, they're life-affirming. Any questions so far?
I have a few.
Right?
Okay.
Thrive on questions, Josh.
I was
I'm not
taking
questioning it enough with Adam.
I was taking notes. I really like what you said about the values. Values and are defined in our earthly plane. I'll just say that earth. So like I'm a technologist. I have this desire, little d desire of playing around with technology and systems. That's why I'm a software developer. So that's part of me. That's part of my earthly personality. And even though I do not develop software now for anybody,
I know you, Aquarius.
but I do look at all the systems and find the best one. And what I'm leading up to is yesterday I reacted to a tweet about a blockchain presentation today at 10 a.m. in Clearwater. And so for a moment, I thought about driving 4 hours to this, but then I did a TED talk and I talked to Siobhan, and I decided within about 30 minutes not to go for a bunch of reasons. So my two values, spirituality and partnership. I didn't react. I was not driven by these expectations that maybe I was creating in my head, like a mirage. Like, this is going to be great. I can go find out this, and come back and build this fantastic platform on the blockchain that involves tarot cards and all this. But I didn't do it. And I'm glad I didn't do it because that was ego. That was my little ego. So I try to maintain that,
Yeah.
what you were talking about, that soul driven and this prideful little ego that thinks it can build anything and everything. And so I put
What
that in my
I
notes.
what I hear when you say technology
Mhm.
is your soul comes to understand your spiritual technology, your system,
Mhm.
right? And if you choose to make a blockchain of tarot cards, if you choose to do that stuff, it is in function of understanding Josh Yates, understanding my spiritual technology and this system that I call myself, my kids, my family, my lover, that's first.
Yes.
That is first, like me. And then I write these things in function of understanding that then becomes a book, that then becomes a class, that then becomes something ego. But first, it's about understanding you as a system, you as a technology. And you do that beautifully. And then you put out these phenomenal things that you send me that I just gaga over,
Yeah.
But it's in that order. And that's why it's spirit driven.
Yeah. I find a lot of inspiration in making these teachings in my little hermit corner over here, and that's fine. And whatever happens to it is, but I love sharing it with people like you and my other favorite people who can actually appreciate it.
Yeah.
I
And
want
then that's part of that. That's part of knowing that. Yesterday I was having a conversation with a client, and she's just kind of starting out in this, and she's using the word savior and healing, and I don't use those words. I don't like those words. I think they're very convoluted and confusing. We don't heal anyone. We don't save anyone. And it's funny because I had written that down when you were talking about, oh, I'm going to go to this thing and I'm going to learn. And I wrote save your knowledge, right? Because we have that in common, right? And you pulled back and you said, wait. I already have the wisdom. Now I can make the choice of letting that wisdom guide, and that wisdom guided you to not go. But those words are tricky because they still take away our power. Anything that takes away our power is victimhood. Anything that we think is going to save us, a new quote, a new class, a new diet, it does not matter the packaging, the new retreat. That's why I said the new retreat hopping is the new ashram and the new monastery of old, right?
Yeah.
And so when we pull back that we are the only system, we need to understand that we're the only thing here, and we stay here, now the ego can say, oh, well, that would be cool, right? I read books, I take classes, I listen to lectures, but first here, come back to self, and then see if I'm going to let the ego tell my soul, ooh, that would be kind of cool. And that's what you did. You said, I'm using those words, the technology is me, the information is me, the system is me, and who is going to be leading that system and that technology? Josh. And Josh made the choice to tell the little d, hold it.
Yeah.
That is the inversion versus that thing is going to lead me back to me. If only when I have the car, the girl, the corner office, then I'll find me. No. I find me, and then I decide I want that desire.
Right.
So the pieces are the same. But since we live in a world of illusion and delusion, we say, oh, look at that person dressed in their Lululemon and going to all these retreats. And then psychos like me look like whack jobs because we're not fitting the mold.
And I had
We're
the
the
thought,
spiritual teachers, though, right? The three of us.
yes. And I had the thought also afterwards, after I slowed down. One of my favorite Yeshua quotes is, I am in this world, but not of this world. So I am in this blockchain system, but I'm not of this blockchain system.
Yeah. And that's the same thing as being in on the con. That's the same thing as being the trickster. I need to go out with single women and do single women things to be in the world, but I'm not of that world. I don't go to clubs, I don't drink, I don't bar, right? But I have to participate. And that's the teaching of Jesus that was lost. That's I think you listened to my birthday lecture, right? The age of Aquarius promise is here, not there. And that I think was misconstrued with Jesus, because he was very clear. Give Caesar's what is Caesar's, your values, your body, your ego, right? The earth, and give God's what is God's, your soul. And so that one in the world of the world has been misconstrued as if the promise is of somewhere else and not here today. And that I think is what we, with our limited time on earth until that starts to have momentum, is what the age of Aquarius promises. That will be of the world and in the world, that will give Caesar's what is Caesar's and God's what is God, but here amongst each of us as mortals and as immortals. Awesome. Any other questions or comments?
I do. So Josh, you go back to what you said. You said the values are of the earthly world. What was it that was your biggest takeaway from what she just said?
Oh, yeah. Well, he had mentioned our earthly values, and how the soul doesn't really care about what we do here with our earthly values. I'm trying to regather my thoughts. And I was looking at her symbolism, at the symbols. So everything that I do here on earth, I think of it like a shell that I leave behind when my soul goes back home. And it just stays here on earth. That's all. And the Kabbalists actually refer to earth as the world of shells.
Yeah, it's the shells, the world of illusion, the world of veils. So all of that is hell in essence, right? It's what's burned and just stays here as we enter whatever consciousness you believe that you go to. But the shell matters. so that the soul has a rightful direction.
Yeah.
That's where values comes in. So if my value is pride, I need a shell that manages the pride so that my soul can do what it does, but doesn't get destroyed in my pride. If yours is greed, then you put boundaries around your greed so that your soul can do what it does with some greed, right? And I'm greed is not only money, but we tend to experience it that way. But then you balance your values around money so that the soul doesn't get lost on the way. That's the trickiness. That's why it's a liminal space, because never does it say in any spiritual tradition to not be here now. Presence is the key. That means you must be embodied, not disassociated. That's the trickiness, and we'll cover that in Otter in the shaman class. Suzanne, Josh already took that, of the liminal space of the body. And it's very difficult to honor the desires of the flesh, use the senses for pleasure, and yet still, Buddha with the bowl, right? Eat, give myself pleasure to reach enlightenment. That's the trickiest thing. That's why I use the metaphor of the suspension bridge. So when you get your values really, really defined and measurable and clear, and you can revisit them and you can update your rule book, right? It's not one and done. Now the soul is guiding, and the values are the shell that's saying, okay, this soul is also honoring of the world in the world.
So I like that, because it's interesting how we all have our own language, right? And I don't want to say new to the values, but I think I'm finally starting to understand them a little bit more, as this has been something that's been a challenge for me. And what I heard today when you were saying all this is that, and I just had this moment where I was like, this values and of the ego is that it's almost like the values are, if you're starting a business, this is my core, and the mission is how it's going to happen within the world. So I kind of spun it a different way, to where I was like, this is what I'm doing it for me, for myself, but this is how it's going to translate in the earthly world. Does that
I have a book
make
called
sense?
Dethroning Sacred Spaces, where I talk about this. And I use the work environment, and I use mission and vision, right? Those statements, exactly what you're saying. So a company, I think it's Warbury Parker, their like larger mission is that everybody gets eyesight or eyewear. This Tom Shoes, I think, is everybody has shoes. That is the soul, right? I'm going to teach one person or 100 people or 5,000 people. I don't care, but I'm going to teach one person. I am a spiritual teacher. Foremost, that is what I do. The ego is how big of an auditorium? How many millions? What's my viewing pleasure, right? There you see your mission. My mission is to XYZ, this amount of people, this amount of money in this time frame, in my 5 to 10 year goals. So yes, that's your shell, that's your container. But the mission is the larger thing that you want to put out into the world. So one of the things I do, I put a lot of free stuff online. A lot of my workbooks are free from my books. I don't need anyone to buy that. That is my soul's way, but I have to pay my bills. So I charge so I could pay my bills. And I have a mission statement around that, right? A budget, an Excel spreadsheet that says, okay, in order for you to pay your bills and be in your container, but the vision, which is your vocation, very different than your profession. Your vocation is your vision of what I'm putting out into the world, no matter what. That has to be birthed out of you. But most of us have this inverted, or this comes after. After I have the marriage, after I have the kids, after I have the house, after I have the bank account, after, and it crumbles. And then we're like, oh, well, I guess I got to do the inner work. So those are planetary influences, if you will, sometimes where we're going down that road that come and say, nope, you're doing it now. Saturn is one of those, and we get that opportunity every 7 years. So I'm just going to continue because I'm going to talk more about that, but I need to get through. The antidote to your vices is having values. This is not to kill off. You're not dying. You're not poison. It is an antidote. It is to balance it out. Okay, it's like a salve to your vices that cannot ever be satisfied. So close your eyes, both of you, and connect to an image, a God, the divine, whatever you view that's on top of you. And this energy, this person, this vision, this man on a throne, whatever you see or feel, is holding a clipboard. And the clipboard is asking a question. Are you a good person? Or on the flip, a bad person? What is on the clipboard? Is there a column of good and bad? Is it just good and is there something on it? Is it just bad and is there something on it? Zoom into that clipboard and connect to what's on that clipboard. And when you have that, you can share if you'd like.
Oh, my good side was just, I've been such a good boy.
That's so great. Who was holding the clipboard?
I visualize Archangel Raphael,
Okay.
sort of the sixth Sephiroth of the Tree of Life, and or Archangel Michael. Either is fine, but yeah. and then on the bad side, I had all the lessons that I've learned that were crossed out, and then my good side just kind of grew. One of the good things I saw was compassion. I've learned compassion a great deal for myself first, and then others.
Okay, thank you. What about you, Suzanne? Who was holding your clipboard?
Mine was actually it was two people. At first it was Lilith and then actually Hestia popped in. So and it was I was just kind of like sitting back for a second before I zoomed in on the clipboard and I just saw good at first and it said underneath it was just kindness and then all of a sudden a line quickly went down and there was bad and it was like selfish.
Okay.
So that was
So,
it. I was kind of
okay. And I mean, I don't know your definition, but maybe kindness and selfish are the same coin, right? Different sides. So the reason I ask, people to do this is there is a belief in our psyche, especially with a Western psyche. Let's get real, that someone's taking tabs. Okay. The other day, someone was joking with me about having a camera following me around. And I said, I grew up in a cult. I had to deconstruct this Truman Show identity, the idea that someone was walking around with a clipboard. That took up many, many, many years of my life. I was a perfectionist, a good girl, all of that, right? A lot of the behaviors I have that I deem good are because of that. They weren't because I'm an angel. Right? Oh, someone's taking score. Let me not do those things, So we want to connect to the idea that we do think that there's someone that is not us. And the first invitation is that is you. So whether it's Archangel Michael or Lilith or Hestia, that is part of you. It's just your superconscious, right? It's this larger part of you that maybe has a fuller picture. The good and the bad is an invitation to see what you're still judging yourself as good and bad, where the duality is. This isn't a bad thing. And again, I don't like that word because it could be the liminal space where the values meet. So I'm just going to use Suzanne for a second. If selfish, which would be linked to pride, is your ego, right? That's your Hydra head. That's the thing that needs containing. Then kindness could potentially be one of the value systems, right? That helps contain that. And then rules around the kindness, because it can't be everybody all the time. That's nonsense. That just goes right back into the 0 to 100 of the TED Talk and the selfish and trying to be, selfless. So this activity, and you can do it as many times as you want, kind of connect with like oh, I'm seeing this dichotomy, and we want to learn how to have both things hold true. That's the liminal space. That's the ego and the soul. So values, how you manage your desires. At the end of the day, thoughts, desires, emotions are fire. Because I told you last time, it's creation. So the minute there's penetration, there's a reason that it's the glyph of Mars, of creation, the creator, right? The penetrator, the penis. There's a reason that that's the glyph, is that what you're really trying to do is manage your desires. That desire that you were shamed for, typically, that desire that is that main immortal head of the Hydra, one of the sins, that desire that is going to get you to build that life you want, have that bank account, have that body, have that corner office, but not destroy you, but rather life affirm you. So values are simply helpful boundaries to your desires, so that that creative fire is not put out like a match, and is not a fire of like Portland or California forest fire and destroys your life, but makes you comfortable with your fire. So it's beautiful that you saw Hestia, who is the goddess of manning your fires, one of my statements, right? So this idea that I can hold both selfish and kind when my fire is properly managed, going back to Josh, he checked in with his spiritual technology, with his system, and then made a life affirming choice. And guess what? Sometimes you're going to make a life destroying choice, even if you have a value system. That's part of it. That's part of the liminal space. That's why the trickster re-enters our life the minute we go back on the other side to dry land, because you're not going to get it all the time, and that's okay. That's part of it. Is oh well, I'll try again tomorrow. I mean, I'd probably say that every single morning. I'll try again tomorrow. So there's no wrong or right. It's saying what you'll say, saying what you say you'll do, and doing it, right? So these are, and this is so important. This is so, so, so important. I swear to you, make it up. Make the shit up. This world of illusion and shells is all made up. Please. There is no writer. But make it up that it suits you, that it feels right to you. No one can tell you how much you're supposed to weigh, how much money you're supposed to have. Nobody. Those things are not real. And the reason we know they're not real is because they're not universal truths. Every single body standard would be the same. Every single living standard would be the same if they were universal. So if it's not a universal truth, it is made up. So make it up, please. And everyone's terrified when I say this. What do you mean? But tell me what it means. It's your
Well, you know what?
limit. Your comfortable limit. Your comfortable limit. Of facts. No certainty. There's no certainty. You cannot Google all this. There's no right answer. There's no permission. You cannot Google it. And if it's real, there is no savior. You cannot Google it. You go to your book that says your values that you have written in defined and measurable terms, and you go, oh, well, I don't want to have more than XYZ on XYZ. And there it is. There's your Google. It came out of your head and your soul and your life and your family and your sins and your beliefs and your philosophy. There is no one size fits all. And this scares the shit out of people.
Yeah.
That's why a guru or a cult leader tells you all the answers. Oh, that's got to be it. And if you look at spiritual texts, I'm just going to use the yoga language, right? The Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. The first two limbs of yoga are himsa, niyamas, and yamas, right? The yamas and niyamas are right action. right thought. And I go to people, do you know what that means? Do you know what it means to be of right action and of right thought? No. The answer is no. I'm not here because it's personal. It's discernment. There's so many factors. It's what is right action for you and right thought for you. That's the part of the process that's very scary. So it's easier to stay on land, to be 0 to 100. Oh, my parents were selfish, so I'm going to be selfless. Right? My parents were prideful, so I'm going to be humble. Easy, easy, easy. No curiosity of self, no conscious choice. So no karma's burned, and more karma's created, more karma's created. And then we wonder why we reincarnate and we're doing the same thing over and over for the 50 millionth lifetime. Come on, people. Like, let's get curious, right? So this is about you. This is about you. What is comfortable for you? So I use the 48 to 52 because it's the midpoint of the 0 to 100, right? And it's still liminal and it's still but it's a container. So one of the things I like to do, because it's safe for me, is I say, okay, 95% of a conflict, of a situation, I can probably strip back the archetype, the TED, the values, and get it down to a 5% liminal space. 5% uncertainty, it's pretty good. It's like what you read reviews for. It's like when you talk to an expert to do your taxes or a lawyer for, right? You go out and you find how it's done before, what kind of works, but you still have to make your choice. And spirituality is no different, but we want certainty in the most uncertain thing, which is our soul. It's absolute nonsense. Enter cult leader tradition, conglomerate that we're in now. We're in the cult leader making world because of this nonsense that we don't want to know ourselves and be curious about ourselves and understand that we are the deciders. There is no clipboard. Who wants to hear that? That's no fun. So this idea of when I put the Vesica Pisces, the 2 overlapping circles, and I put that in probably all my books, the overlap, that's just the 5% uncertainty, that 5% after I pulled back on projecting, it's my thoughts, it's my desires, it's my orgasm, it's my values, all of that. We get it down to that 5%, that's still a liminal space. But within there, now that feels a little bit more safe. So the tools of spirituality from all traditions are to get you to that, to like that little narrow door, as Jesus says. It says, okay, you have all of this, but you have to decide to walk through. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And so this is so that you could feel comfortable that you're not going to burn down the house and destroy your life, but you're also not going to put out your fire, that you're going to make the crack, that you're just going to go, but you've done enough research, you know yourself enough, you've been curious, you're not in victim, you're creating it, it's your archetypes, all the stuff, so that you can walk. And that's why the narrow bridge, that's why the suspension bridge is narrow. There is work to do before you make a choice, and that's why you do all this prep work. And so the Stoics say that it's like muscle building, so that you do this day in and day out in your life in small things, so that when the big thing shows up, you don't screw it up because you've been building the muscle. You've got muscle memory. And we don't want to build our spiritual muscle. We want to be told what to do. Abu Siris come along, enamor us with nonsense and drink the Kool-Aid, and then we all die. So let's get curious and do what you say you're going to do. So there is no right or wrong in the spiritual realm. I use this image because we see that spirituality is circular and spherical. We understand it's a cycle and a cycle and a cycle. You see it in the wheel. You see it in the shaman circle. You see it in every spirituality, the yin, the yang. It's all spiral and spherical, right? But down here, little old you, in your little old body, in your little old self, that you have to make some choices. So true integration is spherical and hierarchical. It's hierarchical because I want to be of power. I want to have this position. I want to have this money. I want to have this job. This title matters. I want that PhD, right? but only in support of all of this, which is your soul, directing it. But ignoring the body is part of the problem, the dissociation, ignoring the values, thinking perfection, good and bad. Do you think, if you believe in St. Peter, that St. Peter's with his clipboard saying, well, you know, you had sex way too much on March 18th, or you ate a little too much broccoli and cherries on March 24th? Why are we putting these restrictions? They're guidelines, they're boundaries, so we feel safe in our self-destruction, because we are desirous, self-destructive hydra heads, people. Nobody nowhere cares you do. Nobody cares. You care. So figure out what you feel comfortable with. How many guys you want to have sex in here? How much you want to pay? How much time you want? Find out what you want, because you're the one with the clipboard saying, oh, I did that, I'm going to hell. Do I have a question?
Oh no, I popped something in there so I wouldn't forget. It was funny when we were doing the clipboard exercise, and I definitely struggle with a lot of stuff, but as we were on the outside of it or about to look in, I just heard, does it matter? Like the good and the bad? I was like,
it doesn't
who's
matter
taking
to anybody but you. That's your ego. That's yourself with a capital, a lowercase s. So it matters. And where does that come from? The TED Talk. What did your parents teach you? What did society tell you? What were you raised in? What culture? What religion? Yes, it matters. You're not in a different tree orchard. You're an apple and your parents are apples. Get over it. But you're here and you can go, oh, my parents said that sex was bad before marriage. Well, I don't believe that. So I'm going to put boundaries around sex. My parents said that pride was bad. Okay, I don't believe that. I'm going to be this amount of proud. You can't change the roots. That's the TED. So it's putting the boundaries around it. And 48 to 52 is a little too restricting. I'm about a 30 or a 40, right? This can't be contained too much in a 48. So I wrote a whole theory around that. In Shadow Side, and I made it up. Your is going to be associated with your moon phase, and mine is a crescent, and that's about a 30-something, and I'm comfortable with that zone. And it's true because those are the teachings of the moon. I'm not saying I made it up because I'm God, but I used the theory and then I morphed it into what works for me. And I happen to test it out on people and it works. People with more evolved moons like balsamic and disseminating, they tend to be more comfortable in the 60 or 70. They want a little bit more security and safety. They want a little bit more to the 48 to 50. So it's just moving the pendulum to your own self-mastery. And that's what the Kabbalion says. When it's not high, it's not low, it's just your self-mastery, your little, you know, it reminds me of a scene in the movie Hitch when, what's this guy? Will Smith is like, he's helping people find a partner. And Kevin James is like this dancing crazy. And he goes, you live here. This is the scene. You live here. This is your 48 to 52 or your version of it. Mine is about a 30, 40. I'm good. Right? So that's your self-mastery. No one cares. No, it does not matter. You care. And subconsciously, because your parents are your gods, I don't care who the hell you are, you want to please your mommy and daddy. Wink, wink. So you're associating those with them. Get over it. Right here. Sun, moon. This is our throne. Mommy and daddy are right there telling us in our ears. Well, if you're not going to be a virgin till the day you die, at least make us not look bad. That's what we're listening to. And that's where you get your values from. That's why you're not so different from your parents. But at least you could say, oh, what were the mandates that they told me? And let me move it over a little bit so it fits my life and my culture, my generation. So it's earthly because it's dual. The square, the earth, the shell, the illusion is all dual. It's going to die. It's going to stay here. That's down here. But who's going to go up the stairs? Is it the ego? Is it the soul? So you do need some guidelines. You do need, even the staircase has some boundaries. You need these two things to coalesce. The earthly is hierarchical. I want to be the hottest one in the room, the richest in the room, the this in the room, the bigger, the better, the bossier. That's your hierarchy. That's your ego. Own it. It ain't going away. Suppress it if you want. That's dumb. And then the circular is that the soul dictates. This feels comfortable. This is too much. These values don't support me. This job doesn't really sit well with the way I want to live my life. They work together. The ego wants position and power because it's desire. And the soul wants a container so that it can flow within the ego's nonsense. And the values allow them to work in unison. So the word value, valer, is to be of worth and to be of good health. You can only have healthy spiritual health and egoic health, which is why in the shaman class, this is talked about in the 6th class of Otter, that has to do with physical health. Physical health is related to emotional health is related to mental health, and mental health is all about spiritual health. And here we are. You cannot be healthy if you do not have value systems established on your beliefs. You cannot. There is no way around it. I don't care how many energy healers and shamans and moon ceremonies you do. Let's move on, people, because this is nonsense. This is health. And we do not have this. 99.9% of people, I'm like, what are your top 2 values? And it can't be family. Don't know what a value is and don't know why it can't be family. We're in trouble. We are in trouble. So I love this image because it's the hierarchy of the soul, and yet it's the circular spherical nature of the ego and the spiritual nature of the soul. So it's spirit and matter, being in the world and of the world, right? Being both. It's being the trickster, yet as unveiled as Lilith before the shame wants us to be. It's cyclical and it's hierarchical. This is the goal. When you achieve whatever consciousness you think, when you leave the body, the ladder stays. The ladder, L-A-D-D-E-R, not L-A-T-T-E-R. The ladder stays. That's what got you there. And then the rest is the vibration and the emotional vibration at which you will incarnate in your next incarnation. And then you pick different parents, and then you have a different TED, and you know the story. They work together. So why do you need values? You need values as a rule book for living. Religion used to provide this. They used to say, don't eat, non-kosher foods, for instance, right? Go to mass on Sunday, the 10 commandments. We see in every tradition, Ayurveda, all the Vedas are is books on how to live, how much to have sex, when to eat, when not to eat, what herbs to take, when to go and look at the sun, what pose to do, how to breathe. That's all religion was. That's all it was. It was a rule book. And then you would have to find your version if you weren't so literal. We've lost that. God is dead. So we have to find our inner God. And that begins with a rule book and your value systems. It's made up by you. There are no wrong answers. And the beauty of it is it stops the nonsense of being validated. God is errors. Jesus a choice. And it. But no, we want validation and validation and validation. Who can live like that? We're kids, and we need to be stroked and stroked constantly all day freaking long. The world can't move forward with that nonsense. Yes, you have trauma. You're a body. Now work through it. I mean, come on. You could see why the frustration that it's like what? I mean, we have got to get past this point of validate every single thing I do, everything I say, all the freaking time. Validate yourself. That's what you're here to do. Save yourself. Then you can put out some vocation and some mission into the world. So Individuation is the key. Notice how the little red guy is over here and the little red guy is over here. Both are true. Individuation is not this thing of authentic truth. I say whatever I want, whatever I want. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. You have an earthly world over here, a society, a job, a relationship that you honor, and you're true to your values. We need to be able to hold both. If not, we're not individuating. We're just doing the flip of our parents. They were covert, you're over. They were prideful, we're humble. Both. So, is whatever this is supporting your values? That is how we get congruency. You're going to be hit with problems and situations and conflicts all day long, every single day of life. The story doesn't matter. Strip it away. Tell me the conflict in one sentence. That's going to tell me what value to apply. At least to a point of 95%. And then those 5% you're going to have to figure out. Does your I like to say, does your earthly world support it, right? Do you have the money to leave your marriage? Do you have the money to go on that vacation? Do you have, and I'm saying money is one of 5. We're going to look at the pillars. So that's how we are congruent. Nobody has a clipboard. You are the one taking score, and you pay heavily with sacrifices. So how do you create a value system? You build a house of values, not a house of cards. There's a scene when Jesus is in the forest and he's not eating, and the devil comes and tempts him with bread. This is temptation. Sin desires temptation. You don't eat the bread all the time. You don't sleep with everyone that comes around. You don't buy everything that enters your Amazon cart. No. The first thing is to find a midpoint of what I will and won't do. Does my earthly world support it? Then you get on the suspension bridge and say, okay, I know what I'm about. I'm greedy. I'm gluttonous. I'm prideful. That's fine. But now I'm going to build a house of values, despite having a foundation that's human and weak and desirous like every other human being. So 2 top values are the top of your house, and they respond to 5 pillars. These pillars are linked to the elements. The Magician card in the tarot, and the first step of any spiritual tradition, Alchemy 101. Water, fire, air, earth. Health is the combination that works for you in your proportion for your life. That's the concept of building a house of values. So the roof that all things lead to congruency is your top 2. So Josh said spirituality and partnership. Mine is spirituality and leadership. Now, our spirituality may be defined very different. I have a spirit wheel with 12 pieces, defined, very, very clear. You don't always get to that overnight. I'll tell you the 2 quotes assignment, which is a pretty good shortcut temporarily. But those 2 values are you in the center, and all roads lead to those 2 values. My recommendation is that you have one doing masculine ego and one being feminine being, so that you can start working the mother and the father wound within it, but that's a little bit more advanced. At the beginning, we just find 2 and we define. Kindness, companionship, consideration, service, whatever it is, work ethic, whatever you can Google value sheets. They're all over the internet. In my 7 Gates book, I have a list of values, but I have them listed as mandates, the way you might have heard them. Work before play. Children are seen, not heard. You eat your food and then your dessert, right? Those are mandates. Those are rules. We tweak those according to what our top 2 values, but that's usually where they come from, things that were mandated. You got your low-level consciousness from your family, never goes away. There's your TED Talk. So you accept that you have these desires and you build from there. Family cannot be one of them, because family is inherent in the desire, inherent in why you don't want a value system. The reason people do not want a value system is they don't want to be disowned from their family and do something different. Because I told you last time, the worst thing for any bee is to feel isolated and disconnected. So even if they say, I don't believe in my family, I do the opposite. They're still part of the family. Costco card, cha-ching. So value system says, I don't want that card. I want pieces of it, but I'm going to go to Nordstrom's and shop. And that is very scary. You're on the suspension bridge. Again, teenager, where they say, I don't want mom and dad. I want my friends and I want the influence and I want to do all this stuff. We're in the same journey spiritually. So many values, so little time. Actually, we barely can live up to 2. So boil it to 2. People will be like, but I have so many. No, you're not even living 2. There's not that many. So pick 2. So how do you know? Shortcuts. I learned this when I first wrote my first book. I loved to say I was a bad mother. Mothers love to say that they're bad mothers. That's like our die on the cross thing. Okay, just so you know. So I was like, well, is that really true? What is motherhood? If I were to die, I'd gotten cancer, right? Chance of dying. And I wanted to see if I was a good mother and make up for it until I passed away. I was like, well, giving my children spiritual education, first and foremost, that is what defines Frances as a good mother. And I'm like, did I do that? Sure. I created a meditation camp for them when they were little. I taught them about this stuff since the day they opened their eyes. This is all they know. Check. I'm not a bad mother. I am a good mother and a bad mother. I'm both. So if you had children, or if you were going to die today, what are the 2 things that you want on your tombstone, that you want someone to say, she lived by that? She taught this through every thread of every story of every Instagram post. Those are your values. And I'm not talking your sins. Your sins are there, right? The pride can't be eliminated from the nonsense. But beyond my pride, if you listen, I'm teaching you a teaching from a sacred text. So you hold both. Both are true. The good mother, the bad mother, the good and the bad, the desires and the divine. They both exist. So that's a shortcut. You are not living these, but this is the person you want to be. And by having the rule book and showing up when the situations that hit you, and you live with this principle, I'm not saying 100% of the time, hey, 80-20, and you honor those values, you're already working towards becoming that person that you want to be, that parent you want to be, the mission statement that you want to live through. You must define your values in measurable and observable terms. The way I describe it to clients is, if someone is walking by my window and I'm wearing an orange hat, they're like, oh, Frances's values are when she wears an orange hat, she's loyal. Okay, check. I need to be able to observe it, define it clearly, because it's not about the person walking outside of your window. It's about your accountability, because you could tell Polly, you didn't come home at 10 o'clock like you said, but you don't tell yourself. So you need to be held accountable to you, because you're not. That's why it has to be definable and observable. So you could see that you didn't eat 3 grapes on Wednesday. No one cares, but you do, because then the fakir beat me down. Horrible person. Never going to amount to anything. You see, I'm not prideful. I'm humble. Nonsense. So I am loyal when I wear orange socks, drink orange juice, take and orange juice, I have to say 3 ounces of orange juice on Wednesday. That's not even fully developed. It's this minutia that we need to hold ourselves accountable. And the funny thing is that we won't do it. We won't do it. We will not drink the 3 ounces of orange juice on Wednesday, because something more important on other will come and interfere. And the spiritual law states the only other, and there is no other, that is allowed, so you're off the hook, Josh, because Riley's not 14, is when you have a child that's 14 or under. Then maybe you could get away with something. So you don't have the 3 ounces on Wednesday, you have it on Thursday, because Riley got sick and you needed to tend to her. So this is the nonsense of saving. Oh, I couldn't eat the 3 grapes because I was to save the paper. No one needs you to save that one. So eat your 3 grapes. Drink your OJ. through what you're going to say you're going to do to yourself. Because if you do believe in St. Peter taking score, he is going to say, why did you say you're going to eat your 3 grapes, but instead you went to save the neighbor's cat? Huh? Tell me that. But no, no, no. We have decided in the earthly realm that saving the cat is more important than eating the 3 grapes. Lo and behold, we are in trouble.
That's tricky.
Very tricky. Very tricky. Liminal spaces, very scary. That's why we want the cult leader. That's why we want the clarity. And never has a written book been written that is literal. These books aren't literal for this reason. Very tricky. You have no time to save the neighbor's cat
So can I ask?
when you don't even know what you need to do to save yourself. It's crazy. Yes. You had a question?
So, and hey, I've been working on this a lot. So I think I'm overworking it. And I know I've even asked this question before, and Josh, please feel free to chime in. So, I'm working on my values and my rule book, and here I am. I'm trying to make these my top 2 really reflected in my rule book. Right. So it sounds like to me, I'm making mine look ridiculous. Like, instead of being like, one of my top 2 values is teaching, and I have all this, okay, if I'm teaching, I'm practicing discernment, and I'm knowing when to stop teaching and knowing when to stop being a student. But it more or less looks like, and I'm a teacher because I eat a cheeseburger on Thursdays. Is it both? Is it one or the other? Like,
the thing is,
and I like that because I'm hard on my body.
The
So I'm like, have a cheeseburger.
So
Yes!
the reason we start simple is because we first need to start honoring our word to ourselves. We are the biggest liars, the biggest tricksters, and the most self-betraying to ourselves and to anybody else. Because someone else is going to make you look good. You're going to get a little thank you note. You might get a little shout out. Woo, woo. Thanks, Suzanne, on Instagram, because you helped me save my cat today. But what are you going to give yourself? A big fat nada. Ain't nobody there to validate you. Ain't there no one there to see you. And that we do not like. But I can tell you that the nectar, the elixir of the gods, the essence of feeling the self-validation, wow, now that's orgasmic. That's orgasmic.
And that's so sweet.
That's
and little.
what the
So
teacher with grace has.
So that's so sweet and little. So now I'm starting to think that one of your students started Taco Tuesday. So
that's funny. So we start off with the small things, right? I'm gonna eat the 3 grapes on Tuesday. I'm gonna drink the 3 ounces of orange juice on Thursday. I'm gonna have the taco on Tuesday, right? Now we're like, oh, wow, I actually keep my word. I actually do this. This feels good. Now what else can I do? Now what else can I do? And then you work up to really defining and measuring the things that are going to be life-changing. Remember, the asceticism from Stoicism is not asceticism, withdraw from pleasure. No, it's building muscle. You'll see that in class 9 in Unified Consciousness in the Shaman with the beaver. So that when the real life situation shows up, you show up and you say, wow. But if you don't show up with the 3 grapes, you don't show up with the 3 ounces of orange juice, you are not going to show up for the big things in life that are going to shatter your world. It's impossible. You can't lift, I don't know, deadlift 150 if you haven't even lifted the little dumbbells of 5. Come on. It's nonsense to think that we're going to show up for ourselves when we never have. We're going to go to the subconscious, to what's easy, what someone else told us, or someone wrote the book that we wanted to read that told us what to do, and we didn't even think about it. And we did exactly what our mommy and daddy did, and then we're back in the TED, in the subconscious. So it's to build up to the larger choices in life that are really the life-altering ones, that are really the ones that are going to say that person showed up with integrity when it mattered. Because that's what it's about. And those are so few and far between, but they are the ones that make us or break us. That's the reality. So we are the magician. All spiritual paths promise alchemy. So in this chart, he's got pentacles for earth, he's got cup for water, he's got swords for fire, he's got wands for, or swords for air, and wands for fire. Because fire is the element of choice. Fire is the element that when we get to that suspension bridge or that narrow door, we say, jump. I'm going in. I know what to do. I know how to do this. I'm going to confront my fears. But we need practice. And the value system or the rule book is practice, 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 practice. And then we tweak and we add and we go deeper and deeper. But at the beginning, we have to start somewhere. So eat your 3 grapes on Wednesday and see how easily you will self-betray. Then don't blame someone for cheating on you or lying on you or not keeping their word, because you are the trickster. That is the bottom line. That's why it's the last, it's the first sort of veil to be removed, and it's the last veil to be put on. It's such a tricky, tricky archetype. So the 5 pillars: food, sex, time, money, and health. So now take your 2, spirituality and leadership, spirituality and partnership for Josh. You said, Suzanne, you said teaching, and I don't know what else. Let's say kindness for a minute. And now put a few parameters, how you honor that value. With food, put 2 to 3 things: sex, time, money, health. Again, these are related to the elements. It's how you manage your elements. I once read something, and it's not original to this person, but she articulated it lovely, which was, you could tell someone's priorities by their calendar and their bank account, right? Where you put your time and where you put your money. It's the same thing. You know what's important to someone with what they do all the time, right? It's where they spend their time, their energy, their money. That's this idea. Does your food, your water element, meaning your emotions, food ultimately turns into the cups, the emotions in the tarot. Sex is the fire, your creation. Are you worried more about sex and having sex, and there's nothing wrong with that? Or are you worried about creating and putting something out into the world that is your birth from your own body? You can have both. Where does your time spent on? Where's your air? Is it on knowledge? Is it on wisdom? Is it on talking nonsense and gossiping? Money, your earth, right? So self-worth, not only your financial, but where do you spend it? Do you make it easily and then give it away? Are you a hoarder? Those kind of questions. And then health is the compilation of the magician, which is the balance of the elements. But you first start with that. Another thing I tell clients as we build is a proportion. How much of your value system or your day's calendar, let's say, do you want to go towards water? 25% to your emotions, 10% to your fire, to your sex or your creation. You can also do it 100% and block out each pillar that way. So make it up. It's all made up. No one's judging. No one cares. It's all you. No one's validating. It's all you. Your mom and dad are guiding you. They are informing this. Do not think they're not. Don't do the opposite of them. Find a little loop over. That's it. That's what you get. You have your mandates. You have your religion. You have your philosophy. You have your psychology. You cannot change your TED. It will inform your values. Do not think it won't, but it's not the exact same and it's not the exact opposite. That's why it's do it different. That's your 48 to 52. So now unified consciousness, which is the goal, right? We started with dual at conception, and now unified consciousness was pre-conception when we were in heaven or wherever you think you are. And now you're here with that same unified consciousness. So each pillar aligns to the top 2 values. If you have a value system that is, I don't want to have sex on a first date, which is absolutely okay. Why? How does it relate? Because you probably, if you can't figure out how it relates, it's probably a mandate. Don't have sex on a first date. You'll lose the guy. He won't call you. So think of the mandate that you were taught either by society, television, your parents, just symbolically in the energy of your life. Well, that doesn't work. Don't do that. If you cannot answer why, then you got to go deeper because there's shame. There's shame there. So spiritual, no hierarchy, your soul. Earthly, hierarchy, power, the earthly elements, the veils, the shells. Together, you are now the magician of your life, and you have health. Does not matter how much you weigh, does not matter how much you're exercising. This is true health. So your spiritual life aligns with your earthly life. What you say you're going to do is what you do. You follow through on things. You begin with small, but then eventually with larger. And then this is the great part of it. Sacrifices and offerings. If you choose yourself and you eat the 3 grapes on Tuesday, you are still going to punish yourself. It's very tricky. And if you don't eat the 3 grapes on Tuesday, you're still going to punish yourself. The difference is one is a sacrifice and one is an offering. If you are feeling sick in one of your 5 pillars, you have a physical symptom, you're having a bad day, you're feeling depressed, whatever your thing is, I'm very emotional, right? So when I go into an emotional helplessness, I know I self-betrayed 24 to 48 hours earlier. But if I chose myself 24 to 48 hours, I don't go at the outburst that I used to, because now I'm more in control of my emotions. The same behavior. How do you reconcile that? Because you have no template for self-love. You have no template for self-worth. You have a template for self-betrayal, and obviously you have to hate yourself, because that's what your parents taught you. So this is a very difficult, slippery slope. This is not one and done. You have to start to know how you self-betray, how you sacrifice, how you offer. Sacrifices tend to be bigger, right? So if someone comes to me and they say, Frances, I just this, that, I'm like, okay, what happened 24 to 48 hours ago? It could be an onset of an illness, like a UTI, for instance, right? We go up, but it could be making an uber large purchase. I had a client who, her job, she's a magazine writer for a travel magazine. And she was offered a trip to Greece or Paris or something. And it happened to fall on her child's birthday. And she said no. Where do you think her TED Talk went? You think she really wanted to not go because her kid's birthday, her kid was turning 12? Hells no. She self-betrayed. She didn't go. 2 days later, she gets a ticket, a parking ticket. Money for money, people. This is science. We self-betray even when we choose ourselves, until the promise is circular and spherical, until it just becomes a little offering, a little dime in the jukebox baby type of thing, right? We light a candle, we say, thanks, mom and dad. We know you told us not to be a slut. We know you told us not to creep on the birthday. Okay, we got it. But my rule book says, and that new pattern, that's on the other side of the suspension bridge. Now it's your pattern, your heels, but you always look back and go, I got you, thank you, I'm safe. I know I'm a teenager, but now I'm an adult, thanks. But no one likes the self-betrayal, to punish themselves. No one wants to give an offering. No one wants to do anything. We want to stay on the safety land, not own the TED Talk. The guru tell us what to do. Oh, but then we want to be authentic. Come on. I mean, this is hard. It is hard that when you self-betray or you self-choose, that you have what I call a death day. A death day. I know when I choose myself that I'm going to have a death day. And I'm like, okay, it's coming. And I wait and I see how it comes up. They're shorter now. They used to be a whole day. Now it's a shorter time. It's part of it. You're at the door. You're going to walk it or you're not going to walk it. 80-20. 80% of the time I do. The other 20, I'm like, oh, well, try again tomorrow. And so we track this. How could this be written in a book? Who could write this book for you? This is your book of life. Who could write this for you? You have to learn. You have to be uncomfortable. You have to figure it out. You got to go, oh, look what I do here. And you have to be curious about yourself. How people are so gossipy about everybody else, but not curious about their mind, I don't get it. So this is a beginning, not only eat the 3 grapes on Tuesday, but this is an exercise that I work with clients with, which is the 2 quotes. If you can't sit out and write your whole definable, measurable values, every pillar, all the things, right? Your rule book, at least start with this. Discover your 2 values that you think they could change, and then find a quote that supports, right? So I'm going to just take you back up to the values. I mean, the suspension bridge. My 2 values are spirituality and leadership. Because my moment of shame where my trickster was created was from a cult leader, right? It has to all align. I don't want to be a cult leader. I want to be a spiritual teacher. So I found 2 quotes that are the boundaries to the bridge on either side. There is no coercion in spirituality that comes from the Kabbalah, and teach a man to live that comes from a Joseph Campbell book. So when I go into my fear of becoming a cult leader, I enter the fire. I'm on the bridge. I don't have anybody on dry land on either way to tell me. I got to count on my own resilience. I have those 2 quotes. I don't coerce people, and I try to leave you better than I found you, to teach you how to live with what I've learned. And that's how I manage the fire. Do I go a little overboard sometimes? Absolutely. Do I go a little under? Not usually, but sometimes. But it's within that range. So my fire, my soul can come to do its job. But I'm not burning down the house, and I'm not playing small. And I used to play small. You don't know how to not be the cult leader. You don't know how to do any of this. Or I think I know it all. Jafar out of the genie bottle. So these 2 quotes are to begin getting you to get to know how to be in that liminal space safe. And I'll wrap up with this. There's 4 unmet needs: safety, protection, validation, and love. All of those are built on safety. If you have no inner safety, you have no protection, you have no validation, and you have no self-love. And therefore, you cannot give any of that to anyone else. This is safety. That ultimately is all that this is about. A container for a desirous nature that you have no freaking clue how to handle, because look at the Hydra. It is scary. So when you have inner safety, rules, even if they're silly, I have a silly rule. I don't help people move. It's stupid. I'll pay for you to have a mover. Ship it. But I do not help someone move. And people will be like, but why, Frances? Because it's safety. I know that I have that. I don't self-betray. And it's hard. I had to tell my best friend that. I had to tell my mother that. No, I don't help people move. My daughter was here a few months ago. I'm on the couch watching TV. She's moving. I'm like, no, I don't help people move. You know how hard that is to tell your kid that? But I have to hold myself accountable so that when the big things in life come, I will say no. Inner safety. That's the key. There's no protection, validation, and love without safety, but we want the world to make us safe. And don't trigger me, I don't feel safe. Oh, come on. When you can make yourself safe with this, then we could talk about the world changing. But until then, we are in trouble. So this is to boil down to the basic unmet need of safety that every single one of us has. And it's rooted in no clarity. This makes you be clear. I will eat 3 grapes on Tuesday, and you don't, and 24 to 48 hours, tell me what happens. And start tracking it. It's phenomenal. We are phenomenal. Our psyche is phenomenal. We just haven't gotten curious enough. And curious is the word of the trickster. It's irony. But that's what I have today. Thank you guys so much. Any questions before we wrap up? Sorry, I went over.
Thank you. That was really good.
Thank you. Yeah, that was awesome.
Now does the model come more into view, like from start to finish? Because
Yeah.
it's all of it,
Yeah.
right? But it's just, we have to chunk and chunk and chunk and chunk. And so, yeah. So thank you guys. Have a lovely weekend. And I'm sure I will see you both soon.
See you.
Yes. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.